Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Shane with Shane Media. In this video, we're going to talk about Chucky Season 1. Let's get into it. Chucky is a 2021 TV series starring Brad Dourif, Jennifer Tilly, Zachary Arthur, and is directed by Don Mancini. Woo! Guys, Season 2 left a pretty bad taste in my mouth with this series, but Season 1 was still pretty solid. I went back and rewatched it this last week to prepare for this video, and it still holds up for me. Like, after watching Season 2, some of it doesn't age very well, and I'll get into that a little bit more later in this video, but it is still a pretty good series, a pretty good season of this series, let me say that. And while this is certainly not the best Chucky's been, it's still a pretty solid comeback for the character because, let's face it, he's seen some pretty low points in his slasher career. Yeah, buddy. But a lot of that comes from the fact that this has been a very experimental franchise. I think we can pretty much all agree with that. You have the first movie, which played it very straight. It was a straight-up horror movie. But then in the second movie, the character was realized a little bit more, and they realized, hey, the concept of a mouthy killer doll lends itself to a little dark comedy. So they did that. Then I think they found that perfect balance with Bride of Chucky, which is in my top 3 in this franchise. I love that movie. It came out when I was a kid. I've got a lot of nostalgic love for that movie. I just love it so much. But then they completely jumped off the cliff with Seed of Chucky. Yeah, that happened. And unfortunately, Don Mancini sticking to that. Yeah, he's sticking to it. He refuses to ignore that movie. But hey, it's his story, man. Let him have it. But then we go back into straight up dark horror territory with Curse, and then back into spoof with Cult, which I did like that movie, but some of it was a little over the top for me. But anyway, I digress. This franchise has more hills and valleys than just about any other franchise I can think of. Probably even more so than even Texas Chainsaw, which as a whole, I do enjoy the Chucky movies a lot more than I enjoy the Texas movies. Those movies, at least most of them, are just really unbearable. But I digress. I don't think anybody really knew what to expect with the first season of this show. Like I said, there's been no real consistency in this franchise, so we didn't really know what direction it was going to go. But all in all, I was pretty satisfied with what they gave us. Like I said in my Season 2 review, they were definitely walking the line of teetering on too much spoof with this season, but I think they, for the most part, stayed as faithful as they could to each character and didn't abandon any of their integral character traits. And I think they kept things mostly reined in, especially with Chucky himself. I think this is the best Chucky that we've seen since Bride of Chucky. Everything from his one-liners all the way to the way he looks. They went back to almost a Child's Play 2 look, which I go back and forth between that one and Bride of Chucky over which one's my favorite look of Chucky. Bride of Chucky's definitely my favorite portrayal of Chucky, but I loved the Child's Play 2 look, so I don't know, I go back and forth, but they do a good job of keeping Chucky as the focal point. They don't neglect the other characters, but they still keep Chucky front and center, and a show called Chucky about Chucky, that's pretty important. So they did a good job with that. Even with the flashback stuff, which I'll go into more detail on that here in a little bit, but I thought they handled Chucky's backstory really well. There was even a moment where it looked like they were going to chalk his murderous and psychotic tendencies up to basically a bad childhood trauma. But then the scene does a complete bait and switch, like it does a total 180. If you've seen the series, you know what I'm talking about. But I loved the way they handled that scene. They gave us a little bit of Chucky's past while not contradicting anything they've set up previously or damaging the integrity of his character. But they also do a good job fleshing out all the other characters because of all the marketing leading up to this, we knew we were going to get our legacy characters at some point, We just didn't know when that was going to be. And I think in the first episode, people were getting worried that the season wasn't going to do a good enough job with the new characters, and there was going to be a giant Andy and Tiffany sized hole in the series. But to most people's surprise, including my own, I'd say they did a pretty freaking good job. And going back to what I said about the legacy characters, I feel they did a really good job building up to them. They didn't just throw them in. They actually had a plan for these guys. They had faith in these new characters, though, that they created, and they fleshed them out first, while still giving us little hints along the way and these little breadcrumbs to let us know that our legacies were coming. And then they just slowly started introducing us back to them. But as far as our new characters, we have Devin and Jake. And I don't think Devin and Jake have necessarily the best chemistry together as actors. And considering the subject matter on these two characters, that is pretty important, I would say. And yeah, that is a flaw. But as far as their individual characters and what they brought to the show, I think they did a pretty good job with them. And these characters did a great job bringing these characters to life. The dynamic, especially between Chucky and Jake in the first couple episodes, and the inward and outward struggles Jake was having, and how Chucky was exploiting and taking advantage of them, was all done really well. You almost really believed that Chucky genuinely liked this kid. Of course, we knew he was up to something because that's just the character, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless. Another standout aspect of this season was the flashback stuff. Fiona Dorff really owned her dad's role. And the first time I seen it, I had no idea that was her. I thought, I mean, I don't really know what they did. It was uncanny how spot on she was. Between her performance and the makeup artist, they really hit a home run here. And I think most people agree with that. I think that was a standout for most people. But despite all the things I feel they did right, and even though I think the good certainly outweighs the bad in this case, there were still definitely some bad. The first really big thing was that unfortunately the ending of this season was retroactively made worse because of season 2. They spend this entire season building up to Chucky's big finale and his grand plan, and I would say it was pretty decent. Nothing to write home about, and there's definitely some inconsistencies with what Chucky can and can't do, but I've just sort of learned to turn my brain off where that's concerned and not ask too many questions with this franchise, because if you try to keep up with all the lore and the rules, you'll go down a rabbit hole because it doesn't make sense. So that was all fine, though. But then everything they do in this season and everything they built up to just gets completely undone and completely wrecked in the first 15 minutes of season 2. So now when I watch this, it just pisses me off, kind of, not going to lie. But the next thing is Jake's aunt. So everyone who's seen this knows what I'm talking about. They keep hinting in the first couple episodes that there's something going on with this character, like some big secret, some big reveal that's gonna almost be some integral part of the overall, plot here. Like the show goes out of its way to make her a suspect of something. Then you get this big giant reveal, maybe halfway, maybe just a little past halfway into the series. It was just cancer, and it was either that episode or the very next episode that her character just gets killed off, and very unceremoniously. Like, it's kind of dumb. Don't get me wrong. I get it. Cancer's bad. But I feel like that was just a very poorly done bait and switch on this character. And it's not even that they gave her cancer or killed her off, because that was an integral part to her son Junior's character arc and his descent into madness. So it wasn't all for nothing. I just feel like it could have been handled better. Another problem I had, which is a problem that they doubled down on with season 2, was, oh, Chucky's dead. Oh, wait, no, he's not. He transferred his soul into another body. Oh, he's dead again. Oh, gotcha again. This gimmick was seriously played to death here throughout this entire, really the series, but even in season 1, they had elements of that, and you could see that it was starting to get overused here. That is a plot device that should be used very sparingly if you want it to have any effect. It should feel earned, but it doesn't. It's abused and turned into a cheap gimmick in this show. And the last noteworthy negative I have for this season is the character of Lexi. And if you saw my season 2 review, you know that she's actually one of my favorite parts of that season. But Something about how she was utilized in this season just did not sit right with me. They tried way too hard and were way too successful at making her a cruel and despicable human being. Like, she's just a character in a show and she wasn't even being mean to me. And I was ready for Chucky to take her out. Like, they were very successful in making her the worst type of human being imaginable. And then in like one episode, they completely turned her character around. She did a total 180 with no real progression into it. And the next thing you know, she's telling Jake that they're family and that they need to stick together. And it's like, did you forget that 2 episodes ago, you were literally making fun of his dead dad? You were the worst type of bully to this kid. Yeah, no, I didn't buy it. But with all that being said, my overall experience of this season was still mostly a good one. They successfully had me invested in these characters. They had me invested in the new characters and still handled the legacy characters very well and had me waiting to see what was next. Only to, of course, let me down, but that's another video. But for a rating, guys, I'm going to give this one a 7.5. I enjoyed it. Not the best this franchise has offered, but far from the worst. But anyways, that's it for this one, guys. Go ahead and like and share this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.